What's going on, my people? Welcome back to another episode of the Stop the Count podcast. In this episode, I will be getting into the fights that happened over the weekend and also the Gold Cup game between Mexico and Honduras. There was a lot of news that came out last week, mostly with the UFC, just talking about some fights. Anthony Smith versus Ryan Spantu was made official for the fight night in Singapore. Also being targeted for that card is Erin Blanchfield versus Talia Santos. Now, Rose Namajunas will move up in weight and fight the number 2 ranked flyweight Manon Fior in Paris, France. Also, Rob Font will face Song Yadong on UFC 289. And a little rumor is Alexa Grasso will fight Valentina Shevchenko on Mexican Independence Day, September the 16th. And it will be a fight night, not a pay-per-view. Now, talking a little bit about the Conor McGregor and the Ultimate Fighter, I've been watching the last episodes, and in my opinion, they flopped. As Conor is being Conor and he doesn't show up to the weigh-ins or meetings with Michael, which would be great for content. And the cherry on top is the fight won't happen this year as Conor hasn't entered the USADA pool. Yes, Conor is a legend, but Dana has to remember no man is bigger than the company. And now for boxing, the biggest news came Thursday as Canelo Alvarez posted on his Instagram that he had signed a deal with PBC. He will be signing a 3-fight deal, a major loss for Matchroom and DAZN. Although Matchroom did confirm a fight between Sonny Edwards and Jesse Bam Rodriguez to unify their belts, the date and location are unknown, but it is being said it will be around the winter and most likely in the UK. First, getting into the Joshua Franco versus kazutoioka fight. So news came late Thursday night that Josh was having a tough weight cut and was nowhere near the 115-pound limit. Now, these rumors came true as he weighed in at 121 pounds, almost 2 weight classes over the limit. It was believed the fight was going to get cancelled, but no, the fight went on as Josh vacated the belt, leaving it only available to Ioka if he would have won. And it was kazutoioka who came out victorious in a great performance as he really never let Josh get into the fight until the later rounds, and even then, Ioka always looked one step ahead. The real news came early Sunday morning as Joshua Franco announced on his Instagram that he was going to surprisingly retire from the sport at the age of 27. He cited multiple problems as a reason for his retirement, and Josh had a great career where he became a world champion and defended that title. He didn't have the best record, but records don't matter. I honestly feel we would have seen Josh in a much different light if he had a competent promoter behind him. But no, he had Golden Boy. I didn't say this in my last video, but if you couldn't tell, Josh was my favorite fighter, and it was a pleasure watching him fight. For the Showtime card, starting off with the fights I mentioned in my last video, Fernandomartinez versus jadebornea. It was a very good fight for both fighters. They were both landing hard shots, and not to even mention the heart on Bornea, as after his ear was busted, he continued. Martinez was able to get the stoppage in the 11th round. It was a great performance from Martinez. For the next fight, ericksonlubin versus luisarias. Erickson was just dominant. It was a controversial stoppage as Arias thought the referee counted him out early, but he took too long to get up in my opinion. The fight was getting kind of out of hand as Arias was getting a little dirty, but Erickson was going to get him out eventually, so I think this was a fair stoppage. For the main event, carlosadames versus julianwilliams. Starting off the fight, it seemed as if Williams wasn't going to want to exchange with Adamas and box around a little bit, but Williams was finding success when he would decide to exchange a little bit, as Adamas really opens himself up when he attacks. Now, the rest of the rounds were really good rounds between both fighters, really throwing everything at each other. And there was even multiple times where I thought the fight was going to end. But it did come to an end in the 9th round, as after a flurry of punches, Adamas was able to stop Julian Williams. This was also another controversial stoppage, as it didn't seem as if Williams was fully out, but who knows, the referee knows best in these situations. For the Matchroom card, first talking about the prospects I mentioned in my last video, Rashant Mati was able to knock out a tough opponent in Dakota Linger. And also, Yannikel Rivera was able to pull off a decision victory over his opponent in a good performance. He did start the fight off slow, but picked it up and looked good towards the end. For the main event, Edgarberlanga versus jasonquigley. It was surprisingly jasonquigley that started the fight off looking really good, and Berlanga was landing hard shots, but Quigley was taking them until the third round, where Berlanga dropped Quigley late. That's really where the fight changed. After 2 good rounds from Quigley, he seemed to have handed the control over the fight over to Berlanga. There were moments where Quigley would land a hard shot on Edgar, but nothing would come of it. Now, this fight also went to decision, and Edgar was able to pull off the decision victory. And honestly, in my opinion, I still don't believe Edgar is ready for any of the top opponents. He just really didn't look good against an opponent like jasonquigley, who was moving up in weight. And I honestly feel as if he would have a tough time fighting with Diego Pacheco, or maybe even Jaime Munguia, who he has been calling out on Twitter and during the post-fight interview. Now, the UFC Fight Night started off with some news on Friday, as during the weigh-ins it came out that Kleydsonrodriguez was overweight by 3 pounds. Now, the teams weren't able to come to an agreement for the fight to go on, meaning that the fight was cancelled. Getting into the sedriquesdumas versus codybrundage fight, you could call this fight boring, but I really enjoyed it. Cody did come out with a horrible game plan, and he had a horrible performance because of that. Although he was at times giving Dumas some trouble on the ground, Dumas always had an answer. A good performance from Dumas, especially showing that good job that he has been developing his ground game, as Dumas was able to pull off the decision victory. The next fight was Jamal Emmers versus Jack Jenkins. This was a really close fight. Jenkins did pull off the victory, but I personally thought Emmers won the fight. Nonetheless, a good performance from Jenkins. For Trevorpeek's fight versus Jose Mariscal, what an amazing start to this fight for both fighters. They were really throwing everything hard at each other, but it was Mariscal who just seemed to be the better all-around fighter. Landing takedowns easily. The rest of the fight was great for both fighters, but Mariscal always seemed to get the better of Trevor. Now, all this led to Mariscal winning a decision victory and taking Trevor's O. A truly great fight, and honestly, in my opinion, this fight should have been fight of the night. Next, I'll talk about Brendanallen's performance. Oh boy, was this a great performance. He was able to finish his opponent after getting hurt multiple times. Now, he did also hurt his opponent on the feet before he was able to lock in the rear naked choke and ultimately got his opponent to tap. For the co-main event, Amanda Ribas versus Mayceebarber. What an amazing fight this was. It didn't last long, but these ladies put on a show, both of them being left bloody. But it was, of course, Mayceebarber who was victorious after she finished Amanda Ribas. Such a great win for Maycee. For the main event, Joshemmett versus Iliatopuria. What a dominant performance by Ilya. He executed his plan perfectly. He started the fight off really defensive, countering Josh, and, visibly looking like the better boxer. Even his leg kicks were very, very effective throughout the whole fight. But Josh was doing a good job staying in the fight, but he was just unable to really cause Ilya any major problems. Josh's face was, left looking horrible. His eye was shut early in the third round, and he still continued. He's a fucking warrior. Ilya won a very, very clear decision, losing only 1 round on a scorecard. Do you guys think Ilya is ready for a title shot, or should he fight another contender next? And who should Josh Emmett fight next? I was thinking maybe Josh should fight Calvin Kattar again for the second time. And now getting into the Mexican national team and their opening Gold Cup game against Honduras. Now, Jimmylozano came out with a good lineup, not what we all wanted, as Henry Martin was, of course, starting ahead of Santi Jimenez. But all that went out the window as the Jimmylozano era started off with a bang. An outside of the box goal from luisromo put Mexico up in the first minute. And in the 22nd minute, Romo scored again. What an amazing first half he had. Now, I can't say the same for the right side of Mexico's line, as Uriel Antuna and Jorge Sanchez had a very, very tough time with Albert Ellis of Honduras. But it was an all-around good first half by the Mexican team, playing so much better than in any game with Diegococca. Great defending from Jesus Gallardo, Edson, and Johan, and the midfielders and attackers were linking up perfectly. The second half of the game, Mexico really started off defending really well as Honduras were attacking. And in a counterattack 5 minutes into the second half, Orbelinpineda rifles in a shot, putting Mexico up 3-0. The 4-0 came in the 64th minute as Luischavez scored off a rebound with a beautiful finish. Mexico was up, of course, 4-0. The game also ended with that same score. An amazing start to the Jimmylozano era. It was a different Mexico. They played so much better than with Coca, and it was honestly crazy. Yes, Honduras is not the best team in CONCACAF, but they did give Mexico a good fight. There really isn't much to criticize besides Antuna and Sanchez, although I still do believe Sanchez was the better start for this game over Julian Araujo, as Albert Ellis was physically strong and fast. But I'll just leave it as that. I'll talk about their upcoming game against Haiti in my next video. I will also be talking about the upcoming NHL draft. Thank you guys for staying until the end. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at StopTheCount10. I'll talk about the shit show that is Milan in my next video, as well as the upcoming fights. See you then.